Lindo. You star into Five Bloods as Paul, a Vietnam vet going back to retrieve the body of his fallen squad leader and also a hidden fortune they left behind. Now, there's so much trauma and menace and tragedy to this character that I feel like it's almost Shakespearean in its kind of dimension. What did you think about the role when you first read that script?
So I have a quick question for you in response to what you just said. Your assessment of the Shakespearean component of the character. Are you saying that because that's what you feel, or are you saying that because you've heard me say that in various interviews?
Well, that actually coming from me. That's how I
Okay,
felt
great.
watching it.
I mean, it doesn't matter. I'm just curious. So yes, because I thought the exact same thing. I thought that it was a huge um, classical part, um, Shakespearean, Wilsonian, as in August Wilson, in dimension. And so I was immediately um, excited at the prospect of playing Paul, even though it's been very well documented that I had this issue with the Trumpian aspect of who he is.
And you're playing a character who is suffering this post-traumatic stress from Vietnam. Part of what he's
Can I
going
say
through.
one thing? I'm
Mhm.
sorry,
Sure.
Daniel. You mentioned menace, and I'm not going to say that you're wrong about that, but I remember the first time that I read the script, Paul was described as having a short fuse, um, being right on the edge, and one can feel that he could blow up at any time. And for me, that was a signal, an immediate signal that I had to investigate what the base, what the bases were for those uh, components of Paul's character. Because to state the obvious, it would have been completely uninteresting and unengaging to just play an angry man. Anybody who's, again, to state the obvious, anybody who's enraged is enraged for a reason. So my job, I knew, was to investigate what the basis or what the bases of those various things were, and um, that is connected directly to the size of the part, and part of what made it a large classical part in my estimation.
And what was that process like getting to the core of this character for whom trauma really underlies so much of the anger that he experiences in the
Yeah,
present day?
it was it was how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time. It was step by step by step by step by step. On the first step, um, once I had commit one of the first steps, um, once I knew I was doing the project, was to try to find as many vets as I could who had experience with PTSD, and that's what I did. The first two um, people that I spoke with are two of my cousins who are Vietnam vets, and I spent time with them. And then I went on to, and they were immense in terms of the information that they shared with me. Um, and I, you know, it wasn't just I was working in New York at the time, and they came to my place, and we just sat and talked. It wasn't just what they were saying; it was how they were saying it, how what they were saying changed when they were talking about different aspects of their experience. I was watching that. Yes, I was recording, and yes, I was making notes, but I was watching them, watching their body language. Um, and what's really interesting about my two cousins who were in Nam, they're very, very different personalities. Their experiences in Nam were very different, and so therefore the experiences the experience of Nam landed on them very differently because they're two very, very different people, which was phenomenal for me because I got to see a range of things just watching the two of them, not only in terms of how they were communicating with me, but how they communicated with each other. So it was like a feast, man. It was this feast of stimuli and data that I was gathering and writing as furiously as I could. And then when I spoke with the other vets that I spoke with, and I just spoke with them on the phone. These were not people that I knew. They were recommended to me. And I just had all of this data. And I just was attempting as best I could to process that data step by step by step by step, um, in service of making this work. The films that I saw, the books that I read, all of that. And it was just a step by step by step by step by step process. Lastly, I'll say that there were also two vets during the rehearsal when we were in Thailand. Spike arranged for two vets who live over there. One is still living in Vietnam. He arranged for these two cats to come and excuse me, to come and speak with us as a group. So all of that comprised my preparation, and it really was a step by step a building process.
And one of the interesting things about the story, the way Spike Lee tells it, is that you and your co-stars playing the characters in present day are also playing them in the flashbacks. What was it like shooting those flashback scenes and kind of getting to show Paul's experiences, like just the way you are now, without any kind of de-aging or different actors playing it?
It was completely organic. And it served the story and the process exactly in the way it was meant to serve the process. I believe, and you'd have to talk to Spike about this, I believe that the prospect of de-aging us was, and again, you really should talk to Spike about this, but my understanding is the prospect of de-aging us was really never on the table because that was a budgetary component. We were not going to get the money to do whatever needs to be done. So it was a class. It then became, I think, a classic case of Spike making lemonade out of lemons and using what he had. But it turned out that it served the story beautifully because in those flashback scenes, we, as our present day selves, myself and my co-stars, Clark Peters, Norm Lewis, Isaiah Whitlock Jr., we were revisiting our pasts as our present day selves. So it made absolute, and also revisiting our recollection of Norm as our present day selves. And so it made complete sense that we would not de-age and that we would be seen the way we are now. And for me personally, it was particularly rich given my particular history with Norm.
And another interesting element of the film and the way your character is portrayed is these late scenes where Paul breaks sort of the fourth wall and speaks directly to camera, and
Right.
we get this much more intense, intimate look inside his sort of psyche. What were your thoughts about the character and what he was going through and preparing for those scenes where it's really the audience and Paul, and it's so intense?
A lot of people have talked about that particular scene. And I've heard some people say that, Paul is losing his mind, crazy. And for me, it was none of that. It was Paul speaking his truth as he sees it at that point in his journey. And frankly, there is and I wasn't thinking about this at the time, but there's a scalpel sharp clarity about where Paul is. you as the audience may receive it in one way, but in terms of how I was investigating those words, investing in that moment in the story, clarity, 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 clarity. Very, very clear about my past, my present, and my, maybe not so much my future, but yeah, my future, my past, in terms of disseminating for myself what has happened to me and why. My present, in as much as despite everything that's happened to me, I'm still here. I'm still right here. And my future, the fact that I'm right here means that I'm present enough to do whatever I have to do in the future. And again, your name is Daniel. I didn't necessarily break it, deconstruct it in those kinds of terms, but I'm deconstructing it here with the various journalists who bring up that particular monologue. In terms of how I approached the work, there was the technical aspect of memorizing all those words. And so I had to memorize those words almost as a separate exercise because I didn't have a lot of time. Well, had I had that scene played in the theater, if it was in a play, I would not memorize the words per se. I would work in the scene to give life to those words. Because it's film, I didn't have that latitude, so I had to memorize the words as a separate exercise, make decisions about what those words meant to me so that I would be ready to do that work when Spike Lee said action. What I can tell you is that the preparatory work that I did on that particular monologue was such, and it started weeks before we actually shot it. The preparatory work that I did meant that I was clear on the day that we started filming that scene. I was clear about how I wanted to approach the work. And there's a certain kind of confidence that comes with that. And when I say confidence, I don't mean, oh, I got this. Not that, but I was clear about how I wanted to approach the work. And when we started filming the scene, the only direction that Spike gave me was he needed me to keep moving. He needed me to keep walking and talking. The first take we did, I came through the brush, those leaves, and I stopped. And he said, no, when you come through the leaves, keep walking, keep talking. That was the only direction that he gave me. And I felt there was a clarity that I had about how I wanted to approach what I was saying and why I was saying it. Lastly, I got to a point, we as a company got to a point where I added some things. I just added some small improvisational things in the moment, and he kept it. He embraced it. He didn't say, Spike, didn't say, no, don't do that, man. He embraced it. And in actuality, he encouraged me to go a little bigger with what I was doing.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the film, on your performance, on the recognition you've been receiving so far, and
thank you.
Fingers crossed, knock on wood, recognition to come. And thank you for speaking with me today.
I really appreciate it, man. Thank you. Take care of yourself. God bless. Thank you.